Let's be real. Glass Onion's ending kinda sucked. And I know I'm kinda late to the party here, but I still need to get some things off my chest. Now let me tell you why I didn't like the ending and what the ending should have been. So let's talk about the real ending. In the last 20 minutes after Helen gets the tissue burnt, which is a problem of its own considering her and Miles were standing only a foot apart, she decides to just break and destroy everything in some sort of cathartic rage, and everyone that had just acted blind to the discovery of Miles being a murderer starts joining in. I was baffled as I watched this scene, as I wouldn't even expect it from a kids movie. But there was a plan hiding under all this destruction. It wasn't pointless, because Blanc had given her a hydrogen mineral, and the real plan was for her to throw it on the fire she created and blow the whole place up. Yes, you heard it right. Helen takes this very dangerous hydrogen mineral and throws it on the fire in an attempt to blow up the whole place, while they're all still inside the house, just a few feet away from the fire, threatening to kill not only herself, but everyone else that stood in that mansion. Miraculously, no one gets hurt, and she has time to let the famous Mona Lisa burn. And of course, all of Miles' so-called friends come out of this near-death experience with a change of heart, and they decide to testify against him. And here the movie ended, and the audience clapped. In all seriousness, this plan, although seeming very smart on first glance, is so unbelievably unrealistic. First, she has to blow up the place while they're all inside, risking everyone's life. But that's not even the end goal, because even if they miraculously survived that explosion, she would have to be conscious and healthy enough to beat Miles to the button, which would burn the Mona Lisa. But again, that wouldn't be the end of it, because all she has done now is incriminate herself, as she has burned the Mona Lisa and the glass onion. So unless Miles' friends testify against him, all this plan was for nothing. So all of that had to happen for her to succeed in her plan, which obviously it did because plot armor. But if she was smart enough to see that far into the future, she would see that this was way too risky of a plan, and that she could go down another, easier, less risky path. So what would that less risky path be? After Miles burned that napkin that Helen was holding, Helen shouldn't have given up and started giving Miles some confidence back, because that's what he thrives on. She should have brought up all the other evidence which they still possessed, in a monologue that would have shaken up Miles' friends, and Miles himself. And what evidence would that be? The fact that Miles poisoned Duke, the fact that Helen was shot by a gun that Miles was holding, and most importantly, the hydrogen mineral that she still possessed, which that alone is enough proof to expose the shady new fuel that Miles wants to profit off. And by not throwing it in the fire this time and getting rid of it, he could hold on to it and prove how unstable and unsafe it is. The threat of that alone in a monologue from Helen would shake up Miles and his crew, and the crew, in an attempt to save themselves, would testify against Miles for the poisoning and the gunshot, which would bring home Miles' defeat. But that's not the end of it, as in true Knives Out fashion, Miles has a last hurrah and tries to stab Helen in a fit of anger and rage. But just like Ransom did before, he fails as Blanc stops him in the nick of time, saving Helen and ensuring that Miles receives his judgment. Now my ending isn't perfect by any means, because what if the crew doesn't fold? What if people don't believe Helen when she takes that hydrogen mineral to the press? And what if they try to blame her for the murder of Duke, and they testify against her just like they did with her sister? You're right, that could very well happen, and I wouldn't even be able to tell you it's far-fetched. What I would argue it's even worse in the case of the real ending. All of these problems that I just listed are magnified with that ending. And why is that? Because unlike my ending, Helen is actually guilty in the movie's ending. Because for one, she blew up the glass onion, and for two, she put the most famous painting on the planet on fire, and both of these fall under destruction of property. That's a real crime that she can get charged with. And what is the significance of that? The significance is that if the disruptors decide to testify against her, they wouldn't be lying, and Blanc wouldn't be able to help her, because she is in fact guilty. And here I know what you want to say, and it is that at least the Mona Lisa and the glass onion are destroyed, which means that Miles' fuel loses all credibility. That also won't happen, because it's a he said she said situation, meaning all the disruptors again could just say that Miles' fuel wasn't the cause of the explosion, and that Helen is making things up. And at the end of the day, the headlines will read, Andy Brand's grieving sister destroys the Mona Lisa and accuses famous tech billionaire of fraud after blowing up his mansion. Long headline, I know, but see how this looks? The movie's plans falls completely to pieces if the disruptors decide not to side with Helen, or of course, like I previously mentioned, if that explosion killed them all like it realistically should have, or if Miles beat her to the button. And one thing to mention here is that in my version of the ending, if they try to blame her for the death of Duke, Blanc will be able to defend her, whilst in the movie's case, it looks like she went on a rampage and completely went insane. So although Blanc would vouch for her innocence, she would have lost credibility for the destruction of property that she is for certain going to get charged with, because like I said, not even Blanc would be able to defend her on that one. So in my ending, worst case scenario is that the disruptors side with Miles and try to testify against Helen, and that the press don't believe the validity of the mineral. But again, I don't think she'll go to prison because the most popular, trustworthy detective is on Helen's side. So in that case, Helen will have lost nothing. Best case scenario, the disruptors testify against Miles because of Helen's convincing monologue, and because they were already on the fence, Miles goes to prison and has his reputation completely besmirched, as he rightfully deserves. Now let's see the movie endings case. Worst case scenario is that they die in that explosion. Second worst case scenario is that Miles beats her to the button. Third worst case scenario is that the disruptors testify against her and she goes to prison for the murder of Duke and the destruction of property charges. Fourth worst case scenario is that she gets let off the murder charges, but still gets charged for the destruction of property. Now after all of that comes the unbelievably unrealistic scenario of the disruptors siding with Helen. Now isn't that hypocritical of me, because in my ending I said that they would also testify against Miles. The major difference here is that she almost killed all of them. Why would they have a change of heart for no other reason than that display of absolute lunacy? But okay, let's ignore that. They testify against Miles, and that of course is a happy ending because Miles goes to prison, just like my ending. But you see the mental gymnastics that we had to endure to receive that ending? It's just silly. Very humbly I pronounce my ending the better one, as it is more bulletproof. And that's my case closed. Anyways, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you want more, and I'll see you in the next one.